Hello everybody, my name is Margherita Brillada and I'm a second year master student of sonology. Today I'm going to present you my research project which title is Sound Art as an Expression of Social Relatedness, giving an overview about how the project is evolving and developing during these years. For many years my work focuses on the production of radio drama and radio documentaries containing themes of current social issues in which I found a form of expression that reflects my passion for sound art, field recording, and my social engagement. My social engagement started years ago in Italy while working around the problematics of refugees, and in 2017 for my degree in electronic music at the Conservatory of Turin in Italy, I composed my first radio documentary regarding a specific situation in my hometown, and on the same year, I had my first experience working for an independent local alternative radio called Radio Blackout. At the beginning of the project, the first intent was to create a cycle of radio drama. That's why in 2018, for my bachelor's degree project here at Sonology, I composed another radio documentary called No Borders. Fascinated by radio art, especially during the last year, my studies moved through its theoretical and historical body, investigating how radio itself and its audience have expanded and changed in recent times, and I try to understand how radio art could contribute to bring a greater level awareness to the audience and involve it in the socio-political life. Now I'm going to give you an overview on the history of radio art. But first of all, it's important to say that it's difficult to delineate a continuity in the history of the radio as an art form because it develops as a state propaganda tool and for military industry. And that's why it has always been regulated by state control and censorship, and artists had not had easy access to the airwave. Okay, at the beginning of the last centuries, artists and theorists developed the first avant-garde theories. In 1933, the Italian Futurist Manifesto was written by Filippo Marinetti and Pino Masnata, in which appear la radia, that is borrowed from Marinetti's notion of parole in libertà, word that it means words in freedom. The basis for his idea was that the elements central to the logical linguistic structure had to be eliminated to reduce language to its essential part. So words were now liberated from the original syntax and juxtaposed by analogy, creating what Marinetti called a wireless imagination. With La Radia, they understand the ability of new technology and predicts the shift of the rule of the radio. In 1936, Rudolf Arnheim wrote Radio, An Art of Sound, that was written when radio was still a relatively young medium. However, due to its ability to penetrate and anticipate the new and future impact of mass media, his book became a classical in the communication studies. And in this book, Arnheim rewrites the Luigi Russolo Arte dei Rumori Manifesto, and he also anticipated the music concrete of Pierre Schaeffer. In his book, he wrote, we can see these quotes in which he says, if wireless claims the whole attention of the theorist of art, because for the first time in the history of mankind it makes practical experiments with an entirely unexplored form of expression in pure sound, namely blindly hearing, it is a no less enthralling phenomenon for the sociologist. We can see that after the Second World War, thanks to the development of new technologies, they open new possibilities for radio artists. Almost simultaneously were born in different countries centers dedicated to the research of new sound recording techniques and for new expressive languages. In 1955, Luciano Berio and Bruno Maderna founded the Studio di Fonologia di Milano, where they developed a new radio art form that is the radiodrama. In the beginning of the 60s, The airwaves open to the private individual, and the radio is no longer under the state control and censorship, thanks to the free radio and pirate radio movement. And in 1995, thanks to the development of the new media, we can see the development of the first web radio and online streaming station. It's important to consider how radio and its audience has expanded and changed in recent times, thanks to the potential offered by the new media in continuous expansion. Radio, podcast, and music streaming platform all have their audience and different way of listening. Thus, starting a reflection on the social context of the project, I wonder where and for who broadcast my work, and consequently, I investigated the context of the new media and its audience, wondering who is listening, how, and where, so in which context. The FM radio is usually listened in everyday situation, spread in small communities and local realities, and is governed by censorship and gatekeepers. While in podcasts and online media, there is more freedom of expression. Podcasts are listening on demand platforms, and in that sense, the audience can choose what, where, and when to listen, allowing a more conscious and intimate way of listening. According to recent statistics, we can see how the new generation is incrementally using online digital platform instead of FM radio. And we can therefore consider that thanks to the development of new media, a new audience is developing. Web-based services use the listening interaction with algorithms to produce music recommendation that could impact audiences' behavior, influencing and shaping the way of listening. We can also see that the streaming platform allows a more intimate relationship between composer and audience thanks to live interaction reaction. I found interesting this quote by Kate Donovan from the University of Boston, where in an essay she wrote, "Radio is currently at a significant moment because major corporations switch from the analog to digital platform, and consequently there is a change from live, collective listening to fragmented listen-on-demand media." Okay, I think that making this distinction today is not so important because obviously there is a change in the evolution of radio audience relationship. But if we consider that today almost all FM radios switch to the live streaming platform, potentially allowing to reach an audience all over the world and to be heard from anywhere, I think that collective listening is still possible, probably even more than before. The use of the new media platform and networks allow us to create a feeling of collective listening by sharing on social media between different communities or even alternating between different platforms, allowing live interaction even more than on FM station. I found also interesting to consider how during this period, due to the COVID-19 restriction measures, media consumption is booming, and live streaming in particular is jumped by 61% during this period. As we sadly know, around the world, concert and music festivals have been cancelled, so the role that new media and music are playing in bringing communities together probably have never been so powerful. And a number of initiatives, from the global to the very local, are using music to bring communities together. And they see the use of streaming platform as an antidote to the growing sense of alienation and isolation in society in general, even more so now that we are being asked to actively practice social distancing and isolation. We can see how artists are forced to switch to this platform in order to not lose audience, but at the same time, this allows the creation of new and different audience for determined contexts and the creation of new online collaboration. One of the most interesting examples that I found is the Oscillation Festival in Brussels, that under the additional strain of collective lockdown measures has adapted and took place entirely online. During my research, I found it interesting to develop a parallelism between some example of the evolution and the relationship between historical theories and contemporary practice. We can see how sound artists today are involved in acoustic ecologies, and among others, I found very interesting this example from Robertina Sebeanic. First of all, it's important to say that the first attempts to study acoustic environment and the impact of the technology on it was by Mario Schaeffer and Hildegard Westerkamp with the World Soundscape Project. And they see recordings as a source of reflection into social and cultural habits, diction, common sounds environments, and nonlinearity oral expression. Robertina Sebianic in 2017 developed a new notion of the aquatocene, where the subaquatic soundscape encourages us to reflect upon the anthropogenic sonic impact on the underwater habitat and marine life. Her work explored the phenomena of interspecies communication, sonification of the environment, and the underwater acoustic, as well investigates the phenomenon of underwater noise pollution. I moved then my research in the artistic practice of artists who move in despair between sound art and activism or social denunciation. And after several studies of different composition conceived to be broadcasted on radio, I decided to experiment with the composite methods different from the radio documentaries, while maintaining a strongly narrative formal structure, exploring semantic boundaries between shaped sounds and formed languages. That's why in January 2020 I composed Statidansia, that is the result of different studies and consideration. Statidansia, that means anxiety moods in English, is a study about the dramatic value of the human voice in the musical discourse, experimenting with sounds and gesture of the cello. I can say that the voice is a central element in my compositions, usually in my previous radio documentaries, to convey a message through speech content, so what it say. In this piece, in this composition, I experiment with the paralinguistic cues, so how it is said. In a first draft of the work, the idea was to include various texts and voices, but at the end I chose to use just one text, one voice, and one instrument. In my previous work, I was using multiple voices with different languages, interviews, or found samples from news as a testimonies of social denunciation. While here, I decided to work in a direct contact with an actress and recorded a poem in different ways with different modes of expression and interpretation. My research involved the study of the works of Luigi Nono, fascinated by the character of his music, articulated between his political ideal and the compositional idea. And searching through the use of the voices in his works and the selection of politically engaged texts led me to an in-depth analysis of his composition Contrappunto dialettico alla mente, that was composed in 1968. That was an inspiration for the compositional process of Statidansia C1, because the formal structure oscillates around the intelligibility level of the voice, and I apply a similar structure with several fixed parameters to the study of the voice. Contrappunto dialettico alla mente was a piece that was commissioned for the international competition for radio art, but was never broadcasted due to its political content. Because Nono chose to include 3 different texts in the composition, and one of which is a poem by Nanni Balestrini, that was a main figure of the Italian neo-avant-garde poetry, a visual artist, and was part of the Group 68, a group of activist artists socio-politically involved. C1 is a poem by Nanni Balestrini, who recently passed away in 2019, And the choice of using one of his poems is a sort of tribute to his works, and because of also of its evocative power, with the allusion to the offshore and migrants problematics. C1 was written with an algorithmic system as the result of deconstruction and assimilation of multiple texts, and it has different level of interpretation. A similar structure was used to articulate the formal structure of my composition. So, as I mentioned before, I experiment in this piece with sound and gesture of the cello. I have always been fascinated by extended techniques for instruments in the contemporary practice and the extension allowed by the electronics applied to it. I started to study techniques for cello, extended techniques for the cello, working and recording in direct contact with the instrument player, and asking to him to to play determinate gestures and sounds with different interpretation. Here you can see different parameters that were useful for me to develop and articulate the formal structure of Statidanzia C1. First of all the formal structure oscillates around the level of intelligibility of the voice, where the voice and the cello move in different and opposite directions. For example, at the beginning of the composition, the voice is completely unintelligible until it arrives gradually at the end of the piece where it's very intelligible, and the opposite happens with the sound of the cello. Then I apply the different sound design on the voice, deconstructing the poem in verse, words, single letters, phonemas, and then I develop a texture with variable densities of this, what I call phonetic dust, and I deconstruct the cello in single musical events, gesture, and using especially the harmonics sounds that it can produce. Then you can also see the mode of expression and interpretation of the voice that apply also to the use of the cello. So I asked the actress to interpret and recite the poem in different modes. And I want to give you an example, one clear example about the level of intelligibility of the voice. I want to show you to extract from the composition. Here we are going to listen the beginning of the composition, where the voice is almost not recognizable, but the sound of the cello is very clear. So, Well, and now I want to show you an excerpt from another section at the end of the composition, where the voice is starting to become slowly more clear and recognizable and intelligible, while the cello is more deconstructed and almost intelligibly.
Proseguendo in hotel, proseguendo in hotel, proseguendo in
Okay, so while working on Statidansia in December of the last year, I started drafting of my next composition. In order to evolve in my compositional path, I decided to work again with an acoustic instrument, but including it in a live performance with the live electronics applied to it. So I started a collaboration with an Italian composer, a friend of mine, and an accordion instrument player, both active in the contemporary Italian scene. And in the drafting phase, we collaborate, deciding together the formal structure and other parameters, the gestures of the instruments and the extended techniques applied to it, the harmonic field, and the behavior of the electronics in connection to the instruments, considering the relationship with the role of the electronics. So after that, we set together these parameters. We brought together the score for instruments, and now we send it to the accordion player. The next step is record it in the studio, and then when I will receive it, the recording, I will finally start to write the electronic score on it. Unfortunately, we were slowed down for this composition because the composer, my friend, is living in Milan, while the instrument player is living in another cities, and it was difficult to. We found difficult to communicate with the accordion player for the interpretation and explaining how to interpret the piece. So, and probably due to this COVID situation, it was impossible to meet each other and to record it in the studio. But finally, on the coming weeks, I will receive the recording and I will continue the development of the composition. Another work, my main goal now is to develop an online radio that I can define also I want to see as a sonic platform. During the last year, I especially focused my project on the research on the radio art, but this year I would like to work more on the artistic and practical application of the studies that I've done. That's why I decided to develop my own radio online station. Of course, the direction of my project would have led me to the development of a similar platform. But in this period, I feel even more the need to create a platform where to make exchange and interaction with other musicians. At the beginning of the project, the idea was to create a podcast in order to be able to share my own composition and my audio documentaries. But I see now the necessity of collaboration in order to go in the direction also of what is my social commitment and my artistic research. So the intention is to create a sonic platform giving space to experimental music, sound art, field recording, and documentaries. creating podcasts and live streaming sessions with the possibility of live interaction on social media, and exploring the potential offered by new media, and offering an intimate space for reflection on artistic practice and communities. Okay, I'm currently working and about on the development of the website, on the social media and the music platforms. I plan now for this semester to experiment with different live streaming platforms and to develop the first radio program and the first podcast. So I'm now thinking about the topics to discuss in it, and looking for collaborations and hosts for the project. So thanks for listening, and hope to see you on Tuesday.